Deep beneath the waters of Guam, in the quiet of Apra Harbor, lies a mystery unlike any other. Two ships, born in different nations, fighting in different wars, now rest side by side, their steel hulls touching as if history itself brought them together. One is the SMS Cormoran, a German raider from the First World War, scuttled to avoid capture in 1917. The other, the Japanese freighter Tokai Maru, sunk by American torpedoes during the Second World War. Two enemies, from two wars, bound forever on the ocean floor. It is the only known place on Earth where a wreck from World War I and a wreck from World War II lie together. And today, we're diving into their story, from the battles that sealed their fate to the haunting remains that divers still explore more than a century later. This is the tale of the Cormoran and the Tokai Maru. Two wars, one graveyard. And subscribe this channel if you want to explore wrecks of legendary marines and aircrafts. Before we explore the wreck, let's first take a quick look at how they sank and how their resting place was finally discovered. Story begins not with a warship, but with a merchant vessel. In 1909, the Russians launched a mail and passenger steamer called Ryazan. She was built to carry goods and people across the Pacific, never meant for battle. But war changes everything. When the First World War erupted in 1914, the German cruiser Emden captured Ryazan off the coast of Korea. She was taken to the German colony of Qingdao, stripped, refitted, and reborn as a new raider, the SMS Cormoran II. Her guns were mounted, her mission clear: strike enemy shipping in the Pacific. Captain Zuckschwert steered Cormoran to Guam, a U.S. territory, hoping for refuge. What awaited them there would seal her fate, and eventually create one of the most unique wreck sites in the world. On December 14, 1914, SMS Cormoran limped into Apra Harbor, Guam. Her coal was almost gone, just 50 tons left. The Americans, neutral at the time, refused to let her refuel. They would not send her away, but they would not let her leave either. And so, for more than 2 years, Cormoran remained, a prisoner of neutrality. Her German crew made the best of their exile. They grew close with the islanders, even becoming local celebrities. But their ship, once sent to raid the Pacific, sat idle, trapped by circumstance. Then, in April 1917, the world changed. The United States declared war on Germany. On Guam, American troops moved to seize the Cormoran. But her captain would not let her be taken as a prize. Orders were given, explosives detonated. The ship shuddered, tilted, and slipped beneath the surface of the harbor. As she sank, history was made. The first shots fired by American forces in the Great War were aimed at her escaping crew. The first German prisoners of war were taken here. And the first German casualties on American soil came from this very ship. And then, silence. Cormoran lay forgotten at the bottom of Apra Harbor, until another war, decades later, brought her an unexpected companion. Decades passed. Guam changed hands, and in 1941, the island fell under Japanese occupation. Apra Harbor, where the Cormoran rested in silence, now served as an anchorage for imperial shipping. One of those ships was the Tokai Maru, a Japanese freighter launched in the 1930s. She had already been struck once by an American submarine, but in August 1943 her luck ran out. USS Snapper fired torpedoes into her hull, and Tokai Maru sank beneath the waves. By sheer coincidence, her final descent brought her down right beside the forgotten Cormoran. In the last moments of her fall, the freighter's steel hull scraped across the German ship's stern, gouging her side as the two wrecks locked together on the seafloor. Two ships, two enemies, two wars. And yet, by fate alone, they now share the same grave. It is the only place in the world where wrecks from World War I and World War II lie side by side. We divers dive deep to the place where two wars meet on the seafloor. What divers see first? The bottom here lies at about 110 feet. That means the wrecks sit within deep recreational/technical dive range. Both ships are on their sides. The Cormoran lies starboard side down, and Tokai Maru rests pressed against her stern. Because of that tilt, decks sit vertical, stairs, railings, and doors look sideways. How the two sit together. The two hulls touch. Tokai Maru's larger hull presses its side into Cormoran's stern. In calm conditions, a diver can actually swim between them and, carefully, place a hand on both wrecks at once. Tokai Maru leans like a wall above Cormoran's stern. Cormoran is noticeably smaller and lower in profile. The physical contact is not a thin scrape. The Japanese freighter gouged a large gash in the German ship's area where the propeller hub and stern meet. Stern collision, the scar that ties them. The most striking detail is the collision zone at Cormoran's stern. When Tokai Maru sank, her hull scraped along and tore into Cormoran's plating. Today, you can see a big jagged hole in Tokai Maru's plating where metal folded and was ripped away. The cut edges are often visible through silt, dark, shadowed openings that lead into the freighter's interior. On Cormoran, around the propeller hub area, you can see the outline of where the two ships met: bent framing, displaced rivet lines, and crushed plate. The hub itself usually remains, but the propeller blades are missing, either torn away during the collision/sinking or removed later. Hull and deck features, promenade, superstructure remnants. Cormoran's passenger ship origins show in the remains of deck areas that once held railings and promenades. These are now twisted and half-buried in growth, but rail stanchions and deck plating give a clear hint that this was not a purpose-built warship. Hatches and skylights. Large hatches and a skylight over the engine room are visible. Many skylight frames survive as skeletal rings or rectangles. Some have collapsed, letting daylight and silt fall into the hull. These openings are key navigation markers for divers approaching the wreck. Anchors. Two distinct anchors are often photographed. One lies on the deck inside a collapsed area. This anchor looks older and heavily encrusted and may be original to Cormoran or a long-ago mooring. Another anchor appears on its side outside the hull and is more clearly corroded and covered in marine life. Engine skylight and stern detail. The skylight over the engine room is a window into decay. Frames remain, but the plates around them are eaten thin by corrosion. Below the skylight, in silted openings, you can glimpse the shapes of boilers and engine room framing, blurred by years of sediment and marine growth. Light filters through these openings in dusty shafts. Corrosion patterns. Look for pitting and flaking along plate seams, areas where rivets have lost grip and where marine organisms have colonized deeply. The steel is soft and crumbly in places. Edges crumble under gentle touch. Evidence of human activity and salvage. Some large items are missing. Propeller blades, visible guns, or heavy fittings seen on other warships are absent on Cormoran. We know the ship's bell was removed and taken to a museum. Other artifacts have been recovered by divers over time. These absences change how the wreck looks today, emptier than many warships of the era. On Tokai Maru, a mooring buoy was attached in the 1980s to aid dives. This buoy is often the first thing divers use to find the site. It's evidence of managed access and of the wreck's popularity with the diving community. Passageways, a sideways maze. What it looks like. Because Cormoran rests on her side, every corridor and passage is rotated. What should have been a floor is now a wall. Doorways lead into what look like vertical chutes. From a diver's point of view, you are not walking forward so much as navigating a sideways labyrinth. How it behaves. Loose debris and decades of silt have settled in every low point. When a diver moves, that fine silt clouds the water quickly. Visibility can drop from several meters to zero in a second. Objects that look like open space are often clogged with mud and rust. Why it matters. The sideways tilt makes orientation difficult. Lines of sight that would normally guide you, deck edges, rails, are skewed. The wreck becomes a three-dimensional puzzle. A short swim can lead you farther into an overhead environment where escape is not direct. Bathrooms and tiles. What survives? One of the most striking interior images on Cormoran is the tiled bathroom. The ceramic tiles, patterned and still recognizable, survive where iron and wood have collapsed. Tile rows are intact in places, giving a patchwork of the ship's civilian past. Why this is unusual? Warships rarely preserve such domestic features. A merchant-turned-raider like Cormoran still carries the marks of passengers and everyday life. Fittings, tiles, bathtubs, things that make the wreck feel personal rather than purely military. The visual story. The tiles are often muted by silt, grooves filled with mud, colors dulled to ghostly tones, but the patterns read clearly enough to remind a viewer that people once used these rooms for ordinary tasks: washing, dressing, living. Bathtub. What remains? A bathtub tipped on its side still lies surrounded by debris and rust. It is intact enough to recognize the shape and the bowl where water once pooled. Why it matters. The tub is the most human object inside the wreck, a private item that anchors the story in everyday life. Seeing it tilts the frame from machines and metal to people, families, officers, crew who once used these fittings. How it reads on film. The bathtub, half buried in silt, makes for an emotional image, a domestic object preserved in a marine graveyard. Stairwell and railing. What to look for. Staircases survive in places, their railings still attached, now pointing at odd angles. The stairwell becomes a vertical shaft of shadow and light, with railings encrusted in rust and coral. Why it's powerful. Stairs are connectors. They lead from one part of the ship to another. On Cormoran, they become a visual cue of collapse. Where movement once was, now tilt. Railings that once guided people are now fragile, skeletal, and dangerous to touch. Hazard note: stairwells are also silt traps. A diver moving through or above them will often kick up a cloud that fills the entire shaft and eliminates a direct line of return. Artifacts, propeller hub, and debris. Propeller hub and missing blades. In the stern area, the propeller hub remains a focal point, a round, dark mass where the blades used to be. The blades themselves are gone, either ripped off during the sinking/collision or removed later. The missing screw leaves the hub looking like an exposed joint. Debris fields. Around machinery spaces and lower decks, piles of decking, collapsed bulkheads, and random fittings collect. These piles tell a mechanical story. Boilers, engine framing, hatch covers, now flattened and silted over. What marine growth does. Over decades, barnacles, corals, and sponges have colonized these mechanical pieces. They mask detail and sometimes stabilize fragile metal, but they also hide sharp edges and holes that can snag equipment or hands. Looking at them today, you can feel both the weight of tragedy and the quiet dignity of memory. They are not just wrecks, they are monuments, testaments to the human lives caught between global conflicts. Now I want to hear from you. If you had the chance, would you dive these wrecks and see history face to face? And which part of the story fascinates you more? The wrecks' haunting interiors, or the history that tied two wars together?